Have you ever seen a puppy watching an older dog and immediately copying? Cute, eh? Like when a toddler develops mannerisms or phrases of a much older person. It can be funny. Copying is how we learn to do things. What happens when copying becomes a terrifying thing to do? He controlled my every move. He told me how to live, how to be, and how to be like him. Keep pushing forward. Keep going in this direction. You can't go wrong. Wait. You're going wrong. It's falling apart. Start again. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. So, I'm still here in the French chateau, or as we call it in France, le chateau. Just me and my dog. What's his name? Oh God, it totally escapes me right now. I can't remember his name. Oh, it'll come back to me in a minute. So, just to clear up one little thing, I said at the end of last week's episode that if you wanted to get in touch with me, you could go to extraordinarystoriespodcast.com. Well, as many of you pointed out to me, that's a complete waste of time because turns out I don't actually have a website. It doesn't exist. There's no point going to extraordinarystoriespodcast.com because Google will just say, this doesn't exist. So great. I've really got my finger on the pulse, trying to send listeners to a website that I don't have. But if you do want to get in touch, there's lots of ways to do it, and I'll give out my fax number at the end of the story. Okay, mesdames and messieurs, if you are ready, okay, let's go. Okay, I'm going to start the story of this woman with a series of statements. See what you make of these. Veronica is one of the most moral people I have ever known. She has been a talented, promising and creative person. She is an angel. She is a dangerous person, truly bizarre. The Veronica that I'm speaking of was born in Los Angeles, which is in the United States of America, and it was the mid-1950s. So her mother, Elizabeth, was a single mother to the young Veronica and two younger brothers. So for the mother, Elizabeth, she had quite a lot on her plate. They lived in a really small house in downtown LA, and Veronica's mother worked lots of jobs to try and feed her kids and to keep her house. Now, what about Veronica's dad? Well, he was an artist and he lived in a more expensive part of LA. He had himself a lovely little social life, but unfortunately he took little to do with his wife and 3 kids. So, growing up, Veronica had a deep interest in horror films of the time, sort of mid-1960s films, and growing inside of her was this fascination with murder and death and the minds of killers. Sound familiar, anyone? We're all obsessed with the minds of killers. I am. Although horror films, no thanks. I declared I will never watch this is about 2 years ago. I declared I would never watch another horror film after watching Wolf Creek. Oh my god, have you ever seen it? It's horrendous. It's based on the Australian backpacker killer. I want to say Ivan Milat. I think that's his name. Ivan Milat, is that right? Sounds like an act at the Eurovision Song Contest. No, I think that is his name. Anyway, this film, Wolf Creek, horrendous. It's honestly awful. I didn't eat or sleep for about 3 weeks. That's an exaggeration, but it's really not far from it. So that's it with horror films for me. Anyway, back to Veronica. So, when she gets to adulthood, because she lives in Los Angeles and there's no other way to live really in Los Angeles, she becomes a screenwriter, an actress. So she's got these ideas, these dreams that she wants to publish books, but she wants also to be an actress and she wants to direct film and stage and she just wants to be in that business. So she's working on a book. It's called The Mutilated Cutter. It's the story of a female serial killer, and it's a blood and guts descriptive book. Now, this was the late 1970s. Veronica was 25 years old, and she was living right in the heart of one of the biggest manhunts to ever exist. Yolanda Washington, Judith Miller, Lisa Caston, Catherine Lore Baker, Dolores Cepeda, Sonia Johnson, Christina Weckler, Evelyn Jane King, Lauren Wagner, Kimberly Martin, and Cindy Hudspeth were the victims of 2 terrible men, the Hillside Stranglers. Now, before you roll your eyes and you say, oh my god, not another podcast on the Hillside Stranglers, we can't take it. Fear not, this isn't about them. This is about Veronica and her relationship to those crimes and to the men who committed those crimes. Now you see, she was obsessed with these killings. They were happening right where she lived. The entire city that she lived right in the heart of was gripped by this. And so when it came to her sitting down, doing her own writing, she was really directly inspired by the killings. She pored over the details in the newspapers. She watched the news repeatedly, fascinated by these deaths. That's when she got an idea. She would write to Kenneth Bianchi, one of the killers who was in prison, and ask if she could meet him. Could she come to the prison and visit him? She wanted so badly for him to see her book. After all, he was the major inspiration for her writing. She loved the way he killed. So she begins writing a series of letters to where he is in prison, But little does she know, Kenneth Bianchi is getting a large amount of fan mail. Men, women, dogs, cats, they are throwing themselves at Bianchi, hoping that he will pay them just a little bit of attention. So after months and months of no reply, Veronica thinks, I know, I'll send him the writing that I've done. I'll send him some of my book, The Mutilated Cutter. Surely that's going to get his attention. So she posts it off with the following letter. Dear Ken, I have not heard back from you. I hope you received my letter and could afford me a reply, but I understand you have a busy schedule. I really think you will find the plot of my book quite fascinating. After all, it was you who inspired it. I hope to inspire you one day. Perhaps the enclosed photo will capture your attention. It's late now. I'm off to bed. I haven't slept in days. How do you sleep? Yours, Veronica. P.S. I like my blood like I like my wine. Also, may I mention that I am an artist. I mean, that's a shit letter, isn't it? That's absolute nonsense. Anyway, that's what she sent to the prison. So she waits and she waits, and then it arrives. A letter from Ken saying he read the parts from her book that she sent. He is interested and would she like to visit. Veronica cannot believe her luck. She's beside herself with excitement. And once it's arranged, she goes to the prison to meet her hero. And what begins here is a friendship, a dialogue between these two people fascinated by the same thing, murder. Veronica will say the relationship began as friendship and then quickly it developed into something much more romantic. I mean, that's as that's as romantic as a relationship between a man who's behind bars for 11 brutal murders and a woman who, every time she visits, is out of her head on cocaine can be. You know? I mean, if I was Veronica, that first visit, I would have been saying, Ken, what is with this hair? What is with this tight perm you've got going on? It's bloody awful looking. Get yourself to the prison hairdresser and sort that out. Anyway, they had bigger fish to fry. Ken sort of takes on the role of boyfriend stroke controller of Veronica's life, and by now she's visiting him regularly. He says he loves her writing, and she continues to supply Kenneth with photographs of herself for the times that she's not there visiting. These are not pictures of her next to, some nice flowers. I can assure you these are saucy pictures. She says of this time, he became my controller. He told me what drugs to take and he told me how to live my life. And then he says to her, something controls my every waking moment, and that is my desire to be free. He wants a way in which police will release him because they believe that the Hillside Strangler is still out and at large in LA. Now Veronica listens to this and thinks, probably like we all think, that is Ludicrous. He's at this point been through a very public, very long, very expensive court case. He's been found guilty. He's never going to get out of prison. But he says, there's a way. All of this can be overturned. But I'm going to need your help. Will Veronica help him? And by now they've become so close that Veronica says she's in love with Ken and she's going to do anything to make him happy. So he asks her the ultimate question. Will she kill for him? Now there's lots of big questions in life and they have plagued mankind forever. They are the very reason that philosophy is studied. Questions like, is capital punishment morally right? What came first, the chicken or the egg? Who was the best Spice Girl? These questions don't have answers, and they're what the brightest minds are trying to work out. Now the question, would you kill for me, should have been a very easy question for Veronica. It should have been no. But that's not what she says. She says yeah, she will. Kenneth has a plan, and here it is. He will give Veronica a sample of his semen. She will choose a female victim in the LA area, kill this victim in the way that he murdered, by strangulation. She'll then leave the semen at the scene, and when police find this victim, they'll say, oh no, we've made a terrible mistake. Kenneth Bianchi is free to go because the Hillside Strangler is clearly still on the loose. Simple, yes? Stupid, yes. But it's agreed. Veronica goes to the prison where Ken gives her the semen sample as agreed. And she tells him she's going to go out and find a female victim and strangle her to death. She will do it under a different name. She chooses Karen. During this time, there's a lot of ideas being thrown about between the two about the best way to carry out the murder that Veronica is going to commit. One of them, which never happens, involves Veronica dressing up as a nun, but they decide not to go with this plan. I just think if there is ever an opportunity to dress up as a nun and you don't take that opportunity, I don't think you're living your life right. I don't. I'm always looking for the opportunity to dress up as a nun. So, off she goes. Now, just to this question. This semen business. How are you transporting that exactly? I mean, I'm assuming, this is without any confirmation, but I'm assuming it was inside a condom. That would be my sort of best guess. But where's Veronica stashing that condom? Down her bra? In an envelope? I don't know. But she finds a way. Write in with your suggestions. Where do you think she carried that condom? No, please don't. I don't think I want that. So, armed with the semen, she goes to a local bar, and in this bar she spots her victim, 26-year-old Kim Breed. Now what Veronica does is she wanders over to Kim, they start talking, they get on well, and they continue drinking until about 10 o'clock in the evening. At which point, Kim Breed, mother of 2 kids, remembers that she in fact has 2 children at home who need fed, and she decides that she's going to do some food shopping. Veronica accompanies her. The two of them go to a supermarket. They get food, they go to Kim's home, they feed her kids, and Veronica suggests they resume partying. Odd, I think, that you would just meet someone, a complete stranger, in a bar, take them with you on your shopping trip, home while you feed your kids, and then go back out with them. But whatever, hey, I'm not judging. So Veronica really, what she's looking for here is a way to lure Kim to her death. So Veronica says, look, I have a room at the Shangri-La Hotel nearby. How about you join me in my hotel room for one final drink? Kim Breed agrees. The two women go to the room and they have that drink. They take more drugs. And it's then that Veronica decides it's now or never. She catches Kim Breed by surprise from behind, throws her on the bed and begins to attack her. She attempts to get Kim bound to the bed with rope. Now she manages to get Kim tied up and starts to move to the next part of the plan, strangling Kim to death. However, Kim overpowers her, manages to get free of the ropes, and there's a struggle between the two women. Eventually Kim gets free and flees from the hotel room. Outside, she gets to a phone box and she calls a friend to tell her what has just happened to her in that hotel room. She doesn't call the police. Now, a lot gets made of this about why she didn't come out and call the police straight away. And I suppose at first that jumped out to me as like, yeah, that is odd. Why would you not do that? But then I also thought, and again, this is not judging, but I just thought maybe she wasn't in a place in her life where calling the police would have been a good thing for her straight away. So, up in the hotel room, Veronica is in a panic. This is a mess. A palaver, some might say. She hasn't been able to do what Ken wants, and she knows he's going to be furious. She's furious with herself. So she leaves the hotel room in a panic, leaving behind all of the evidence. And now she's got to decide, where's she going to go? What is she going to do? So she goes to the airport and she catches a flight to San Francisco. Why? No idea. I think she's just thinking that she needs to get on the run, basically. She just needs to get away from the situation. Now, something begins to happen to Veronica at the airport. She begins to realise the horror of what's just happened. She's just tried to kill a woman. And she starts to become hysterical, visibly upset. She's shaking. She gets taken aside by airport staff and they call the police. When police arrive, they find Veronica babbling a lot of what they think is just baloney about a murder, about the Hillside Strangler, and they think, I think she's on some kind of drugs or she's coming down from something, so they just let Veronica go. What they have done is they've written down her rambling thoughts as best they can and have filed them away. From here, Veronica gets on a flight to Washington. When she gets to Washington, she writes an anonymous letter to police telling them that the Hillside Strangler is still on the loose and that there was an attempted strangling in an LA hotel room. Now she's thinking surely that's enough for police to let Kenneth Bianchi go. Police are like, what the fuck? This letter is bonkers. Now, what Veronica is not to know is that by now Kim Breed has actually gone to police. She's told them all about the horrendous experience that she's had, and so police begin to join up the dots. The women in the airport babbling about strangulation, Hillside Strangler, the letter saying he's still on the loose. Okay, it's time to track down Veronica. And they do. And she is arrested. And it does not take long before the whole story unfolds. Veronica is charged with attempted murder, and she starts to make headlines as a copycat killer. All the while, Ken Bianchi is trying to write to her. Now, when she's arrested and put in prison, she slowly starts to realise exactly what's happened, how much he has manipulated her mind, so she doesn't write back to Ken. The two of them cease any communication. But her obsession with death isn't over. In prison, she becomes obsessed with a man called Douglas Daniel Clark. He is a serial killer convicted of murdering and decapitating 7 women. I think it's safe to say that Veronica has a type. She knows what she likes. This was Tinder. She would have a very narrow field of interest. Must be a killer of women, or I'm simply not interested. Seriously, so her and this new serial killer, Douglas Daniel Clark, they start writing letters to each other. He sends her pictures of decapitated women, and she loves it. Oh. Now there's a court case, and Veronica is sentenced to 50 years in prison with the chance of parole. Now this is where that list that I read in the beginning becomes so important, because the parole board will meet regularly, time and time again, to discuss Veronica's case and question, can she be trusted to be set free? And the things that they're reading are things like this. Veronica's one of the most moral people I've ever known. That's from someone inside the prison. She had been a talented, promising and creative person, but Ken Bianchi robbed her of that. That was her lawyer. She's an angel. That was her mother. She's still a dangerous person, a truly bizarre human being. That was a psychologist. So there's conflict. People see Veronica in very different ways. Now, whilst the parole board are meeting and deciding what should happen with Veronica, she gets a few ideas of her own. She decides she doesn't like this prison malarkey. So she escapes prison twice. Each time she only manages to be free for a week before being brought back. Now obviously each escape just pushes her chances of parole further and further away. And so time goes on. Time passes. Veronica begins to adjust to the fact that she's going to spend years in prison for her crime. And so, moving to, I guess, what is the final part of her story, it's a sort of twisty, turny ending that I don't think I would have seen this coming. A man by the name of Professor Wallace, who lectures in law and on the subject of reform, one day visits the prison that Veronica is in, and he's here to give a lecture. Whatever that subject is, whatever he's come to talk about that day, Veronica disagrees heavily with him, and she writes to him to let him know just how strongly she disagrees with his views. So what begins here is a series of letters between this professor, visiting professor, and Veronica. And the two of them continue to just exchange letters. Now he is a much, much older man. He has been married for nearly 40 years to his wife. But here he is, beginning to develop a real fascination with this woman behind bars. It develops into phone calls. Before you know it, the professor and Veronica are falling in love. Not yet divorced from his wife, the professor proposes to Veronica over the phone. She has years left to do on her sentence, but this doesn't bother him. He wants Veronica as his wife, and so they agree to marry. Then the conjugal visits begin, and within a couple of months, Veronica is pregnant. Now this is where things will start to take a turn in the right direction for her. She has the baby, it's a baby girl, raised by the professor and Veronica's mother outside of the prison. The baby is brought on an almost daily basis to visit Veronica behind bars. In the year 1996, Veronica wins parole, finally, and she is allowed to leave and be with her baby, her new husband, the professor, and get her life back on track. That is until a social worker comes to do a welfare check on the baby, on Veronica, and is greeted by Veronica opening the door naked, and, as the social worker puts it, altered by some kind of substance. Veronica says none of that is true. She says she never opened the door naked. But it's one person's story against another, and one of the people in the story has a history of very odd behaviour. Veronica is returned to prison for breaking her parole demands, which say that she must avoid any drugs or alcohol. So it's back to seeing her baby through bars, and it's going to take a few more years until 2003 when Veronica is freed once more for the final time. These days, she lives with her husband, her now grown-up daughter, and she spends her days gardening, living a simple life. She has this warning for us all. She says, be careful of your choices. They end up defining you. Veronica says she's never had any further contact with any serial killers, and she no longer follows the murderous ways of killing women. That's behind her now. So, from a young writer, interested, fascinated by murder, to a copycat killer, to a normal mother and wife, that is the story of Veronica Compton. The professor told a reporter in 2015 that his wife's interest in murder is long behind them as a couple. He says this: if you stop by our place now, you'd probably find us what we should have always been doing, digging up dandelions out of the grass, washing windows, taking our daughter out, and making love on a daily basis. And so ends the story. Well, there you go. I've always been interested in Veronica Compton because I do have an interest in these people who fall in love with serial killers. I sort of thought, in a way it's interesting to say that the murderous interest is behind her. And people can change, of course. You can be interested in something and then lose interest in it. This is a bizarre thought, but I suddenly thought, what about this age now of true crime podcasts? I mean, for someone like Veronica, of course, she's the subject of some of them, but also if you did have that interest and it was sort of somewhere in the back of your brain, this would be prime time for her to get herself a set of headphones and start listening to, you know, some murder podcasts. Anyway, that's all I've got to say on the matter. I'm going to get out of here. There's only one episode left in the women's series. It's coming soon. And if you want to get in touch in the meantime, hit me up on my MySpace. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.